So financial wellness in simple terms refer to lack of stress related to money. Employees as individuals should feel good control over their finances as they progress in their career. For organizations, employee financial wellness or lack of financial wellness can have multiple effects and impact. Um, a financially stressed workforce is going to be very less productive or like prone to absenteeism, anxiety, lower morale, and thereby it's going to affect the overall organization and the culture itself. Financial stress is real and a present problem. If poll results are to be believed, more than half of the workforce today express financial stress. And I see this every day around me. Most organizations think that an increased salary will resolve the issue, so they try to connect salary with the financial security. So are employees as well. They wait for their hikes. They think a hike comes in and they're going to resolve every issue around them. But is that really going to meet the needs? It's not going to go away. So as employers, one should take a structural approach to address the financial stress. Organizations that probably follow a pedestrian approach to financial wellness won't be able to reap the rewards of a financially secure staff for their organization.
Thanks for that question. And I can say that, uh, part of my insights come from PGIM, which is Prudential Global Investment Managers, Prudential of the US. And they have been engaged for many, many years in this space of financial wellness and run a specific program for corporate employees called Prudential Pathways, which runs in more than 250 corporates across the US. And a lot of the experience and research and work that has been done in the space is what probably informs, my recommendations or, my observations in this area. And Hari, to your question on what organizations are doing, clearly there is a shift from understanding wellness purely as health interventions with employees to include more of the happiness related to mental well-being. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that the pandemic has probably brought that aspect of mental health to the fore. And there is a recognition widely across organizations that wellness has to move beyond health interventions to financial wellness as well, because as Sukanya rightly mentioned, a lot of financial anxiety does lead to productivity losses as well as employees not being at their best. And we know that financially fit employees can lead to financially fit organizations. And therefore, in terms of the kind of interventions or things that organizations have been doing in our understanding is actually now really limited more to larger organizations. Smaller organizations tend to look at things as a cost, and therefore they are not fully geared yet to sort of offer financial wellness programs to all of their employees. One, because their workforce is small, and therefore employees themselves feel less anonymous when participating in things that they do compared to larger organizations. And therefore the way that organizations go about this is first to make sure that the top management is well invested in this aspect of financial wellness for employees. It's not just an HR initiative in organizations. It has to be seen from an employee's perspective. It has to be seen as their HR department working with the senior leadership, including the board, if that's required, in really recognizing and allowing for these initiatives and investing their time in these initiatives. Because for many of the larger organizations, this is also about retaining talent and attracting the right kind of talent to the organizations. As we know, it's a people's business, and this becomes important. Now, I could touch upon a few ways that some of these organizations think about it. And I think primary amongst that is to think about the workforce from the life stage perspective. So you will have a set of people who may be millennials, as we call them, or young employees who have just joined the workforce. You will have employees who are probably setting out on, their family way with kids and their sort of challenges. And you will have employees at the upper end of the age spectrum thinking about retirement and the anxieties related to, do they have enough to move on into their next phase? So the recommended ways and the ways that organizations deal with this is to try and look at their workforce, bring it down into these cohorts, if I may say so, and then think about specific interventions for cohorts. Because for the younger cohorts, it's probably debt management that they will need a lot more focus around. Whereas in the Middle Ages, it's more about the holistic financial planning. And at the upper end of the age, it would be related to retirement and how much is needed and how much is available. And retirement, if I may spend a moment,
Yeah.
one way to think about it is amongst all financial goals, retirement is the only financial goal for which you don't get a loan. Every other financial goal, whether it's about educating your kids or buying a home or buying a car or starting a business, you can get a loan today, but you don't get it for retirement. So that makes it even more a bigger sort of responsibility. So that's one. Two is organizations do think about the fact that they've got a younger cohort of workers. We also have the gig economy as we know it, which has expanded so much. And in this kind of an environment, gamifying the aspects of financial education or financial interventions for financial wellness is another way of, adopting routes to reach out to employees. But in sort of sum and substance, I'd say that probably there is a long way to go in providing holistic financial wellness to employees. Interventions seem to be still ad hoc in nature, and that does not give the required impact to employees overall. And the satisfaction scores, for instance, for a lot of employees are when holistic financial wellness interventions are done. Of course, I will also conclude by saying that for organizations, the other challenge is measuring the impact of financial wellness. It's one thing to say we need to do financial wellness, and that's well recognized probably. And it is another thing to really measure, are we having impact? And I'll go back to what Sukanya mentioned, which is in measuring absenteeism, measuring probably how productivity is moving along in organizations, and simple things like satisfaction scores, employee satisfaction scores are working. So it's a combination of some of these things that are being adopted by organizations. And I think that, whether it is cost or ease and convenience of doing these programs and the expertise available are questions that one needs to deal with and organizations are dealing with in this space.
I could, the way I see it is that I have handled the teams which have been closer to 5,000 people and closer to 30 people, right?
Okay.
From a large organization to startups, right? So a lot of the issues or the points which were raised by Sukanya as well as Ajit, I think they resonate. But the fact is that we need to see it from an organization perspective in terms of why so far this has been, nations have been little reluctant to touch it, and because there are various, there are impediments, if I may put it. First and foremost, money is seen as a very sensitive topic, right? And employers, and it is a sensitive topic, and I think Sukanya will probably relate to it because it is a sensitive topic because appraisal increases, etc., etc. It comes back to that. So organizations tend to keep, I think, a few lengths to in order to avoid, right? The discussion maybe feel that it's best that the employees manage it themselves, right?
Yeah.
Second is that in today's world, there are a lot of digital platforms and apps, right, which deal with financial aspects, but which one is the best? As an organization, you need to basically take a call, right? And most of these options are different, disparate. So how does the organization ensure that what is the best? And again, we come back to the cohort. What is best for each cohort, right? After so that's a decision which the organization needs to take, right? And what is the value they provide? Again, coming back, this is again related to the first point in the sense that you need to be seen as non-intrusive, and especially with regard to, let's say, millennials or something, I would say non-preachy, non-paternalistic, because they shouldn't see it as interference, right? In terms of because it's still seen as a close personal thing. And again, I think Ajit brought this thing up. Sukanya also will relate to this. Is that the organization wants to basically look at workforce engagement and productivity, right?
Yeah.
So rather than dealing with this on a day-to-day basis of employees, of course it does matter that the happy employee is a better employee, more productive employee. But the fact is that the organization would tend to move towards that. So in a sense, these are some of the challenges, and these are some of the challenges that need to be overcome.
Sure, Hari. So employees are assets, right? And we really, as an organization, need to help them out, to have a financial security. Um, and Shiva and Ajit, covered the entire spectrum of it. What are today's challenges when it comes to financial security for an employee? There are tons of digital platforms today. So digital platforms can simplify a transaction, but it can only solve only one part of the problem. For example, an employee requires planning in terms of investments, retirement, life insurance, protection. And typically, like somebody needs all convenience in managing his or her, financial transactions. And this is an ongoing process. It's not that, he's going to do it today and tomorrow, everything is going to be in an auto mode. He has to be working, continuously, throughout his life. Market is filled with tons of such platforms, but it deals with just, one or two aspects of the spectrum, and that results in a huge gap. As an employee myself, I need a digital adoption platform that covers most of the aspects, or at least the entire spectrum, and obviously as an employer, I would feel assured to integrate such a system with the existing system in my organization, that it will be perceived as less biased.
Hari, this is something which definitely occupies front and center of all conversations when it comes to wellness. And I think the simplest way to think about where is the source of this anxiety is to think about it this way. Any self-respecting adult, if they need to have control over two aspects of their life, it is health and wealth. And unfortunately, this is not taught in schools. Right. And so when we become an adult and get into our working life, you're going to be asking your neighbor and your colleague and your friend for different ideas. And what suits them may not suit you, but that's the only source of information that you have. So it becomes a sort of a acquired skill eventually as you turn to be an adult, but it is supposed to be an essential skill that you should have learned way back. But unfortunately, it is a case, I guess, across the world, not just in India, that this is not taught in schools as much as it should, the basics of nutrition as much as the basics of money management. So both of those things are challenges for people when they become adults and come into a workforce. The second aspect is a growing realization that things are more behavior based, and challenges are more behavior based and unique to individuals rather than taking a broad brush to the problem. You can't spray and pray here. You'll have to really look at specific issues that are there in different households. And the challenges have only increased, Hari, as the world has moved from defined benefit programs to defined contribution programs. So now the onus of saving money for the future is on the employee, not the employer. So if you look at maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, 80% of people would be covered under defined benefit programs. Currently, it's probably under 12% world over. That's what research seems to suggest. Second is inequality has been front and center in conversations across the world as a problem. So the gap in pay and the fact that, organized unions, for instance, have completely disappeared. So you have this huge, massive gap between the top ends of the firm and the lower ends of the firm, which creates a lot of anxiety and friction within a firm. The gig economy has obviously been a feature of the new world. Technology has gone to the extent where you can just click and pay. So it has spoiled the discipline of the younger workforce in terms of saving their money and allocating it to specific goals. You put all of this together and you realize the challenge has only got even more difficult for both employers and employees in trying to deal with this subject. Research suggests that over the last 10 years, incomes have gone up by maybe 35%,
Okay.
but house prices have gone up by 66%, right? And if you look at tuition fee, the cost of education, that's gone up 170%. And if you look at medical expenses, health-related expenses have gone up 210%. So you look at how incomes have grown versus the key aspects of your financial life, which is your house and your health and education. They've just completely such a wide gap between, both of this, that's led to a lot more in terms of how the challenge is. The bigger the challenge, the actual, given that technology is available, it has only meant that adoption of technology to personalize and customize has only actually been a benefit. And organizations that can adopt financial solutions, digital solutions, that has the ability to personalize and customize will definitely be a great help for both organization at the employer side as well as the employee level.
Yeah, thanks, Hari. Before answering that, let me again draw upon my personal experience. I deal with 26, 27-year-olds as part of our startups, right? And they come to me. I also have a son who's 26, right? Who's working, and I see from a millennial perspective, what they do or how they behave, right? And some of the experiences is also based on that, and also on the fact that as Ajit very nicely put it, I'm a part of the last cohort, right? Or rather was part of the last cohort. Yeah, retirement planning can be very stressful, right? So you have to look at that. So keeping that in mind, first of all, at least in my opinion, that platform needs to be at least choice-based, holistic. And essentially, you need to offer the employee some scope for learning, right? Self-learning, so that they can learn more. And if you look at some of the current, I'll not take names here, right? Some of the other trading platforms, they do part of that. They don't do fully, they do part of that. So it's not been hugely successful, but okay, mildly successful. Second, the platform should humanize technology. When I say humanize, it's a platform which is interactive, right? And essentially it learns from the user. For example, risk-based assessment, right? When you are young, right, you obviously have a higher allocation to equity rather than debt. And as you grow older, the percentage comes down depending on your risk appetite and your loans, etc., etc. Of course, as Ajit very rightly pointed out, it is primarily in terms of the younger part is cohort is dependent on loans, but at the same time, the fact is that they can take far more risks, right? Than say someone who has a couple of kids, right? Who's towards the latter half of their careers. So that's something which is would be very, very essential. It has to be interactive and it has to adapt to the user. Third, again, to make it interesting, it should be gamified. Okay, and again, it goes back to point two is that you should have analytics, which essentially tell you what exactly, right? And that will, I think, avoid the pitfall of sounding preachy, because you're actually countering with numbers and data, right? Which is, I would say, a very, very strong logic for anyone who sees that, rather than just saying that, I had seen it 10 years back, I had seen it 15 years back, but sheer numbers, I would say, and the data flowing out, I think that slice and dice would be far more important when, trying to convince the employee. And finally, it should measure the effectiveness. For example, and I'll take the example of money control. I'll just take so money control, for example. It gives you across it measures your net worth, right? It also you can see at a glance how much you have invested across which sectors, what is your annual return, okay, what you invested in, and how it, for example, how has gold performed versus real estate versus equities versus mutual funds versus the alternative investment funds, right? So each of these has a certain rate of return, and depending on that, so you need to make sure that the effectiveness is shown, right? And some sort of a scoring methodology would definitely help, which would let the user know that, okay, you find your let's say, as you're in cohort 1, you have these needs, and you have done this, and hence you have got this, right? Some of the platforms do that today, and then so they can modify their actions accordingly, and then take further steps.
Well, Sukanya, if I may just add a point related to what I was saying earlier, I think that as Shiva rightly said, as the workforce, and if you look at a country like India is largely young, the aspect of personalization, customization, and localization, if I were to put it in those three buckets, I think those are the three sort of pillars that people are, more and more expecting from anything that they would like to use. And given the young cohort, the aspect of authenticity in what is being done is very critical. As Shiva very rightly pointed out, it cannot sound preachy. It cannot be a product provider coming in there and doing something because, you very clearly think about, well, there is some conflict of interest there, or a product is going to be shoved down my throat kind of feeling. So a neutral third party who can, connect all the dots holistically, at the same time provide the ability to self-learn, doing it yourself, doing it together. Those are two aspects. But at the core of it, if it can be personalized, localized, and customized, even if it means from a language perspective, in a country like India especially, I think those are aspects which any good, digital platform should be sort of incorporating in its interventions. I'll just add an observation that I've had in my experience since we're doing so many of this, not just in the US, but here in India as we attempt to do it. And things which are unique, which present an issue which only can be solved digitally, for that matter, which is that, a single household, a husband and wife, when they have a particular income and saving, they are subject to 4 different regulations in India. Right? You've got the Reserve Bank of India that talks about loans and banking and the rules related to that. You've got SEBI that talks about your savings and investments and your capital markets. You've got IRDA, which then talks about insurance and the rules that apply to insurance. And now you have the PFRDA as the 4th regulator that talks about pension and related to that. Whereas the household wallet is one. So the challenge in front of an employer and both an employee can only be solved digitally if one can connect the dots between what an individual can actually look forward to when there are 4 different sets of regulations on the same household wallet. It's a challenge for employers, and I think it can only be solved digitally. So more power to the platform, Hari, that you and the team have built, and I hope that it can help people. I'm sure it'll be helping employees in its way forward.